Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got an interesting story out of Colorado sent to me by Pat. And a lot of times when I talk about lawsuits and people say that, if you got sued and the lawsuit wound up to not go anywhere, could you then sue the people who sued you? And it depends. It depends on what they sued you for and whether or not the lawsuit was frivolous or if it had any merit. But there's a case right now out of Bailey, Colorado, where a restaurant owner is suing the attorneys who filed a lawsuit against his business. And they refer to this as a drive-by ADA suit. That is the American with Disabilities Act. And those laws, the ADA, requires businesses to make accommodations for people who have disabilities. And so some people, if they encounter a business that's not making accommodations, will look at the law and go, hey, the law says that I can sue these people to get them in compliance. Well, there are some attorneys who are said to go out and look for violations and then find people who will basically put their names in the lawsuits. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but that's what the restaurant owner is saying. So Denver ABC 7 reports the story of a restaurant owner who wants to get even and is turning the table on attorneys who filed waves of ADA lawsuits against businesses across Colorado, including his own. So the man who owns the restaurant says in a 39-page lawsuit that the attorneys who filed the lawsuit against his business are committing fraud and abusing the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. He said, I can honestly say there was a period of time where every night I would wake up in the middle of the night. Now, he fought that lawsuit and he won. And a plaintiff who was identified with a very strange name said in the pleadings to live in Florida, filed a lawsuit against this man's restaurant and in 2016 and said that the restaurant didn't comply with the ADA. Now, among the allegations of the complaint were there was many violations of the ADA. But when the owner of the business and his attorney say that they think that the lawsuit was bogus. So they basically said, and this is a quote, give us $15,000 and we'll go away. That's what the man says he was told by the attorneys for that case. So he's now filed a lawsuit against the attorneys in Florida and Colorado, and he alleges that they formed a criminal enterprise by using the ADA to institute actions based on fictional plaintiffs, false allegations of injury, and false allegations of standing to collect quick settlements from Colorado businesses and clients. You might say, wait. Fictional plaintiffs? Well, there's actually an interesting angle here. The people who are behind this lawsuit now, suing the attorneys, say there's no evidence that the plaintiff who is named in the lawsuit is a real person. When they sought to depose the plaintiff, this guy says the opposing counsel moved to dismiss the case rather than produce him for a deposition. So if you're involved in a lawsuit, okay, in a big case, big lawsuit, and you're being sued and you want to know what the other side will testify to when they go to court, you can take their deposition. The deposition is where you can make somebody come in and sit down in front of a court reporter. They'll get sworn to tell the truth, and you can cross-examine them before you go to court. And both sides can do this, so it's not unfair or anything like that. And it's how you find out what they're going to say when they get to court. And so a lot of cases do settle as a result of depositions being taken and it becoming very obvious to the players which way this thing's going to go. So when someone calls up the plaintiff's attorney and says, we want to take your guy's deposition, that is expected in any case. You expect that to happen. I've never filed a lawsuit and thought they'll never depose my client. Even my lemon law cases, they depose my client. Tell us about when you bought the car. Tell us about the problems you had with the car. It happens. So they said, we want to depose the plaintiff. And the other side dismissed the lawsuit instead of producing him. So the guy here who's brought the lawsuit against the attorneys, and this is a quote, they dismissed the case literally in 10 minutes. Now, of the ADA violations alleged, only a handful were valid, and the restaurant owners said that they quickly and cheaply fixed those problems. For instance, a urinal was a few inches too high. A toilet paper dispenser was a few inches too far from the toilet. And a grab bar was, again, a few inches off from where the ADA dictates. So there's actually guidelines that have been promulgated under the ADA that say if you have a place of business, you must accommodate under our statute. And that means, and they've actually defined how tall the urinals are and where the grab bars go. And a lot of places that were built before the ADA or that were simply upgraded along the way, they thought, well, we got to put in a grab bar, we put in a grab bar. Oh, the grab bar is off by 1 inch or 2 inches. So one of these plaintiffs here previously told Contact 7, I'm talking about the plaintiffs in the lawsuit against the attorneys, that the attorneys for the plaintiff, who they're not sure if he actually existed, never sought photographic evidence or an affidavit to validate whether or not the restaurant owners had remedied any of the violations that the business had. He said he and his employees never remember seeing a man in a wheelchair around the time the man claimed to be in Colorado. They also said that no one spoke with him about the violations prior to him receiving the lawsuit. So the lawsuit claims this guy from Florida with a really strange name came to the restaurant in a wheelchair and couldn't get around inside the restaurant because of all these ADA violations. Allegedly left without complaining to anybody while he was there, and didn't complain to them after he left other than to file the lawsuit. Okay, so they said, well, we did get the lawsuit, but no one ever said a word to us about the business otherwise. So now the ADA case did get dismissed after he asked to depose the plaintiff, but he had to shut his business down for months and lost a substantial amount of income. And that, in part, is why he's seeking damages from the attorneys who put him in that position to begin with. He said, if I had my druthers, what I'd like to see is these people no longer in business. They do not deserve to practice law. He also keeps hoping that Congress and Colorado legislators will pass legislation that would create a cure period before a business could get sued for an ADA violation. Previous attempts to do so have stalled. And that would seem to make some sense, that ADA's got all these regulations, and some of them, by the way, are pretty obvious. You need to have a ramp to get into your business, and most businesses have got ramps. What you might not know is that the ADA defines the slope of the ramp, the length of the ramp, the height of the ramp, and all this other stuff. And there are people out there who, in good faith, have installed a ramp. And somebody comes out there with a tape measure and a micrometer and figures out, hey, this thing's off because over this length it rises this instead of this. And it seems like a warning might make sense, but, you know. The attorney representing the attorneys who are being sued told Contact 7 Investigates that they would not comment on the case. However, the attorney then sent Contact 7 Investigates a demand letter ordering the station to preserve evidence relating to its coverage of this case since 2016. And the quote from the demand letter says, "We may well be required to serve a subpoena upon you and or Channel 7 to collect, parse, and review electronic information, including but not limited to digital or other videotapes, edited and raw, correspondence, e.g. emails and text messages, and producer and reporter notes." That's part of what the letter says. Contact 7 Investigates has forwarded that letter to its corporate counsel in Cincinnati. So, just so we're clear, guy owns a restaurant and gets sued. Lawsuit gets dismissed. He files a lawsuit against attorneys who filed a lawsuit against him. Then when the TV station asks those attorneys about the lawsuit, the attorneys' attorneys contact the TV station and said, no comment, but save all your information. And that letter then got sent to the TV station's attorneys. So it's attorneys all the way around. And some people do joke and say, Steve, you understand that attorneys make business for each other. There's a real old joke that says that one attorney came to town and was starving until the second attorney moved into town. There's some truth to that. But there are people who've pointed out that some attorneys, and I'm not saying these attorneys, but some attorneys have discovered that if you find a business violating the ADA, you can make some money by contacting and saying, we'll sue you, or you can pay us some money to go away. And they'll come into a town and they'll just find a bunch of businesses. 60 Minutes did a whole piece on this. And just file a whole bunch of lawsuits, and they'll do it in the name of some plaintiff who says that he's willing to put his name on the complaint. But there's a couple issues there. It depends on what state you're in. but states have rules. I've mentioned this many times recently. Rules that attorneys must abide by. And one of the things that attorneys are supposed to do is represent people with legal problems. One of the things they're not supposed to do is go out and drum up business. Now, you might say, Steve, I see them advertise on TV all the time. Aren't they drumming up business? Well, the attorneys on TV say, have you been hurt in a car accident? Have you been hurt in a slip and fall? So if you've been hurt, you might have a case. So for them to say, hey, contact me if you have a case, that's not drumming up business in that sense. But what is when the attorney goes out and says, hey, if I can only find a plaintiff to sign the complaint, I can sue those people. And that's the line that gets crossed that a lot of people do wonder about, especially with the ADA. So the ADA is an important law, and it's hard to imagine what life was like before it existed, when you would want to go to a store and you're in a wheelchair and you can't get in the door because there's no accommodation for your wheelchair. But there is no question that there are attorneys out there who are abusing it. Again, I'm not saying these attorneys. I'm simply saying there are attorneys out there. So it's a crazy story. Pat sent it. Thanks a lot. Restaurant owner sues attorneys who filed drive-by ADA lawsuit against him. Denver ABC7 reports it. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. If we were meant to stay in one place, we'd have roots instead of feet.